All right, so this video is about how to best apply spinners and loaders when you're building websites that do fetch calls to bring back data and load it. So this is what my spinner, my loader is going to be. Just a simple little pulsing animation. While I'm fetching things, this is what I want to show. Now, oftentimes when you're testing things locally, you're not going to see the animation because things load so quickly. If it's a remote call to data, then yeah, you're going to have a little bit of a delay and you are going to see this. But we're going to talk about when the best time is in your code to show the loader and remove the loader, the spinner. Okay, so this is the data that I have locally that I'm going to load, just this list here. Very small list. It's going to load really fast. In my page, this is my spinner, my loader. When I remove the class active from this is what happens. It just disappears. I don't see it. So all I have to do in my code is add the class active to this div, and that's what's going to make it appear as an overlay, doing that little flashing thing. This list right here, this UL, this is where I'm going to load the content. So that's it. So there's the HTML, and that's my data, my CSS, just the simple animation. So that's there. And if you're looking for a copy of the finished code for all this, if you look in the description, you'll find a code gist with all of that. Now, in my code, I've got sort of a utility function here using a promise to create a delay. Now, if I pass in an amount of milliseconds, that's what I'll use for the delay, but the default value I'm using is half a second. So if I call this function, it's going to return a promise, so I can make it part of a chain of promises, and the default delay that it's going to have before it runs the next then in my promise chain is going to be half a second. So here we have our spinner, and we're going to do a fetch call, and the URL that I'm going to be fetching is just my local books.json file. We're going to have a then where we deal with the response. We're going to have a then where we deal with the actual data. And at the end of this, you should always have your catch. So this is a basic little one. Inside of here, we get our response object, and we check to make sure if it's okay. So if not response.okay, I'm going to throw an error. And then that's going to be sent down to the catch. The catch will catch my error, and I'm just going to write it out to the console. So we'll say console.warn error message. So I'm going to get this message from up here appearing in the console if for some reason it does do the fetch, but it brings back something that's not valid. We're going to take the response object and just extract the JSON from it by calling our JSON method. So pretty standard fetch call. Then here we have the actual content. So I'm going to have my books. That's the entirety of this. So it's an object. Inside of it, there's an array called results. This is what I'm going to loop through to create the content on the page. So I'm just going to start right now with basic loading. We'll get that working, then we'll add the spinner and we'll talk about that. So my UL is that list. And then we will get the array out of books. It's that results property. There we have it. Now I'm going to do a very simple, the inner HTML for my list is going to be this array. I will map to create an array of strings, and then I'll join them all together. So for each book, I will return a list item, and inside of here we will put our book.title. So we're extracting these titles as we loop through this. Okay, so this should work. Yep, sure enough, there it is. And it's pretty much an instantaneous thing because it's fetching a local file. There's no delay whatsoever. So for our spinner, what you want to do is before you actually start the fetch, this is when you want to display the spinner. So we'll say spinner class list add active. So that's going to show it. We're not removing it yet, but there we go. It shows the spinner. Now the data comes back almost immediately. When we want to get rid of the spinner, we're just reversing this. So when this is completed, after all this is done, this is when you would normally remove it. But if there's an error, we also want to do it here. So if it works, remove the spinner. If it doesn't work, remove the spinner. So these both are going to be remove methods, and we get rid of it. But I had to write it in two places to make this work. And I'm not really seeing the load happen here. So just to give myself a little bit of a delay, I could call the delay method inside of here, or I could add another .then, and inside of here, in this function, we can call our delay so we can call it like this, or we can just say, hey, the thing that I want to call is a delay, like that, and use the default. But again, this is happening after the load, so I'm not even seeing anything different unless I move this inside of this function after this delay, which, okay, fine, you can do that. You can say, hey, I want to do a delay. I want to wait for the delay to be done and then remove it, or we can have another function afterwards where we put this. So this is running inside of there. So we load the data, we do a delay, and then we remove this. But that's a lot of work to do just to get a little tiny delay in our code. Sorry, this needs to have the async await. But anyway, I don't want to do this approach. This is a lot of work just to be able to see the results. With the Promise.finally method, I can avoid having to remove it in two different places. We can come down here after the catch, and the promise has this finally. This is another method that you can chain onto the end of here. And inside of this, we're not getting any values necessarily passed in here. We don't care about any values being passed in. But this becomes the place where I want to do this. I want to run this code regardless of whether there was an error or whether it worked. After this entire chain, it doesn't matter where I went, if I jumped from here to the catch, or if I got to the first thing and jumped to the catch, or if I got to here and then this failed, or if everything worked and I just got to here and the catch never ran. In any of those cases, it's going to run down to the spinner finally being removed. So again, there we go. If I want to see a bit of this loading, if I want to get a little bit of a delay, yes, I can put a delay where the list instantly appears and then there's a little bit of a delay before the spinner goes away. But for the user, that's not really a good thing. It looks like it's failing to get rid of the spinner. It would be better if we just slowed down the rendering of this list a little bit. So instead of doing it this way, I'm going to turn this function into an asynchronous one. So we add the async in front of this function, and that means I can use the keyword await. And if I can use await, it means I can use for await, do a for await of loop. So we can say let book of array. So here we are, we're looping through the books, same as we did up here, but now I'm going to have a little bit of a delay. So let's just console.log. Inside of here, we'll say, we'll add an li for, and we'll look at book.title. All right, so we're running through this, and right now there's no delay whatsoever that's actually happening. Let's bring up our console. There we go. So it's instantaneously doing all those things. Yeah, I saw a little flash of the loader here, but it's instantly doing these. I want to put a delay, and I can do that now because I'm inside this for await of loop. So we can say, hey, I want to wait for a delay, and I'm just going to hard code in 200 milliseconds, so 0.2 seconds for each one. Now I'm getting that little bit of a delay. So if I'm adding to the page, doing the same thing, we can say that ul.innerHTML plus equals, so we're going to append onto it basically what we did in the console. This with my book title inside there. And now we've got that delay happening. So this is stepping through all of these things. And that's great. For the size of list that I've got, I've only got, 10 items inside of there. It's not a big deal to do this. But hard coding a delay amount for this works great. If I had a list of 500 items, that's a long delay for something that almost instantaneously came back. So we're going to use the size of this array to determine how long the delay is between each of them. So I'm going to create a delay amount of 2 seconds, and I'm going to divide that by array.length. So array length, this is the number of books in this array. I'm dividing 2 seconds by that. So this is the time for the entire list to render. And I'm just dividing it evenly for each one of those items. And we'll use that here. So it takes 2 seconds for the entire list to render. And even if we were to come in here and say, okay, let's double or triple the size of this. There, I'm just using the same items 3 times. You can see it runs through the list much faster. It's still only 2 seconds for the entire list. And that's what this simple little calculation does for us. All right, so we have the spinner being added, and we're having it removed in one line of code in one place in the finally method after everything runs, whether or not it works, which is important because it often gets forgotten here inside the catch. When you're testing it, everything's working great. If you never come across that fail condition, you never get to see that, oh, damn, my loader, it's not disappearing. I've got the spinner staying there forever. Here, it's always going to run, whether or not the fetch worked or it failed. We're always getting rid of this after this bit of code right here is complete. And now I've got a little bit of a delay going along with my spinner loader. So I've got the animation. I've got a little bit of animation of my content as it's being added to the page. And I'm taking into account the size of the array when I'm doing it. All right, so I hope that helps you out. Hope that gives you some ideas of things that you can do with your code. Again, if you're looking for a copy of this completed code, you'll find a link to the code just down in the description. And as always, thanks for watching.